Welcome to Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen, a bi-monthly podcast designed to teach the searchers, seekers, and spiritually curious the basics of metaphysics and new thought. They are all about the basics, but they are not basic bitches. Now, here are your hosts, April Darley and Jen Merkel.
Everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen. My name is Jen Merkel. I am a transformational life coach and certified hypnosis practitioner. You can learn more about what I do, schedule a private reading or a free hypnosis consultation at jenmerkelhypnosis.com.
And I am April Darley. I'm a magical mindset coach, and I'm going to help you release those fears that are sabotaging your life and not getting you where you want to be. You can find out more about magic and how to create magic in your life and shift that mindset over at my website, aprildarley.com.
Thank you so much for listening to us. Welcome if you are a new listener or if you're a returning listener. Thank you again for joining us. And don't forget to give us a like, give us a subscribe to us, follow us, whatever platform you might be listening to us on. We are on all the things. I mean, we're on all the major podcast platforms, but also YouTube. So many different ways you can get your dose of Spiritual Basics podcasts. We're everywhere. We are everywhere. So another thing I wanted to mention too is if you are into social media, you can follow us at Spiritual Basics Podcast on Instagram. We have a Facebook page. We are even on Twitter. Our handle on Twitter is Spiritual Pod, only because the whole thing didn't fit in because your handle on Twitter has to be, I think, a maximum of like 8 characters or something like that. But also if you want to follow me, I am Life Coach Jen M, as in Jen Merkel, on all the things. And April, what is your handle?
I'm Dr. April Darley. It's Dr. April Darley, and I'm on all the things as well.
Yeah. Awesome. So, April, I know this morning when we were chatting, you said you had a headache. And how's it doing?
It's better. So for you listeners who may not be familiar with me, or this might be a little fun fact, maybe I've never mentioned before, is I never used to drink coffee ever at all. I only started drinking coffee. It's like I woke up one day in December craving coffee. It was December 2019. And that was odd. So I called one of my friends and said, hey, I think I need a homeopathic remedy because I'm craving coffee. Like something's clearly wrong with me, right? Because I made it through the entirety of med school. I'm in my 40s, right? Never drank coffee. So she was like, just go get the coffee. And so I did. I went to Starbucks and got one of their seasonal yummy drinks, right? And I think I did 1 or 2 in the month of December and I was fine. And then the next year, December 2020, same craving hits, coffee. So I go get one of their seasonal things, but only that craving never went away. So for the year 2021, I've probably had 1 coffee a week, maybe 2. And white chocolate mochas are my poison of choice, basically, Starbucks. And so now that we're inching toward fall, they've got all their fall things out, right? The pumpkin spice latte. And
that gets earlier and earlier every year, I swear. We're going to be in May drinking pumpkin spice latte, which by the way, I cannot stand pumpkin. So I'm not all over that at all.
And I've never had one. And because I've never got into the Starbucks craze at all. But now I've got all the things. I've got the app. I've got the gift card. I'm earning bonus stars and like all these things. But so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to get one of their iced apple crisp macchiatos. I've never had a macchiato before either. I'm such a coffee novice.
What does macchiato even mean? Like, how is that different than latte or anything?
You are asking the wrong girl because I don't know all the things. Yeah. I've even been to Italy and I never drank the coffee in Italy, right?
Wow. I'm not a coffee drinker myself, so I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah. So when I got it, it was this beautiful layered drink. But when I took a sip, it's bitter because all the sweet stuff is on the bottom. right? So
Oh, okay.
I had to come home and like stir it up to get all the
So like when you get a cocktail, it's all
yes.
pretty. If you
Yeah.
want it to be more
Yeah, if you don't
like
want to
mixed together,
drink
yeah.
straight shots of alcohol that's
Sure,
floating
yeah.
on top, you got to mix it. So I did that, and it's okay. And the crispy, spicy part of it kind of tastes like an oatmeal cookie to me. I mean,
Okay.
that's okay, but
Mm.
apple flavoring goes into artificial like real fast.
Yes.
So
Agreed. Cherry is the same.
same, yeah. So
Yeah.
I felt like it was okay. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to order it again.
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of those flavorings, especially like at the big chain coffee places,
Mhm,
it's so much artificial stuff that
mhm.
it's kind of like, eh,
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, actually, like I said, I don't drink coffee, but in the summertime, Starbucks sometimes has that guava drink that I love because you know how
Mhm.
crazy I am about guava.
Right.
But a lot of times they either sell out of it. I think they had supply chain issues with
Mhm.
it. But they were using guava syrup, and I don't know. I mean, it tasted real to
Mhm.
me. But of course, they don't have it anymore. But the other day, I was actually at Starbucks and I got a dragon drink, which is really
Okay.
good. So good. So
Mhm.
it's very different,
Mhm.
coconut milk and dragon fruit,
Mhm.
basically. That's all it was.
Okay.
So, but it was good, nice and refreshing. So
Nice.
treated myself. Karma got her little puppuccino, which she knows what that word means. She's
Yes.
probably had him 3 times in her life, but she knows what it means. She gives a little head tilt, like, what? Puppuccino? Yes, please.
Puppuccino? Yeah. So my dogs won't do the puppuccino anymore. They did it for
Oh.
they did it one time and then they turned their nose up. So I don't even bother now.
Yeah, the first time I got it, I didn't know it was free. I thought I'd have to pay for it.
Mhm.
But all it is, and I wanted to know what it was this last time when we went, so I actually tasted it
It's whipped
because,
cream.
like, is it just straight whipped cream? But it
Yeah,
clearly has sugar in it.
of course. Yeah,
So, and it's fine, but it's not like I give it to her all the time,
yeah,
but it's a nice little treat. She
it is.
likes it.
Yeah. Well, that's my big news that I went out of the Taurus routine box, went to
I know. You
Starbucks.
even went out of the house.
Yeah, I went out of the
Wow.
house, and it's not even my normal going out of the house day, right? So, yeah, I'm all kinds of adventurous today.
Nice.
What's going on in Gen World over there?
So I have a show and tell for you, April,
Oh, I like it.
that you're going to love. And it is along the theme of today. We're doing, by the way, we didn't mention this, but our episode today is all about retrogrades. So we're going to be talking about the different planets and what happens when they retrograde and what that all means. But my share today, I bought something really cool. I don't know if you've seen this before, but I saw it when I was at a show last month when I was at the North Tarrant Holistic Fair. Someone there, she's an astrologer,
Mhm.
and she did a quick reading on me and she used these. Have you ever seen these guys? They're
Yes,
dice.
yes. Mhm.
So they're dice, and I believe all of them have 12 sides. Maybe one has an additional side. I'm not sure exactly, but there's 3 dice altogether, and one die has all the zodiac signs on it.
Mhm.
Another die has all the planets on it, and the third die has all the houses on it. So the idea is to shake the dice and then come up with something. So, like, for example, I just shook. We've got we've got Pluto. No, that's not Pluto. What is this guy?
That one is Venus.
Venus. Okay. Oh, yeah, the female, obviously. That
Mhm.
makes sense. The female. So we got Venus in Virgo
Mhm.
in the 4th house. So the idea is to give a reading about that's the energy that you have today. So I thought
Interesting.
that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know enough about all of the things by heart. So I did
Mhm.
a little cheat sheet on myself for
Mhm.
myself with what all the different things mean. So I've been practicing that, and it's so much fun.
That does sound fun.
It's really cute.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just got them. I think I got them on Etsy. It might have been eBay. I can't remember.
Mhm.
As you know, I'm boycotting Amazon.
Yeah.
So I don't like to even mention them on air. I haven't ever,
Mhm.
I think, but many reasons why that is. Anyway, so I've been doing a lot more shopping on eBay and Etsy
Mhm.
and finding things are a lot cheaper
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, they
But
can be.
anyway, it was really, they're really cool. And so just playing with those and having fun. Do you have a set of these by
I
chance?
don't, and I'm a
Surprise.
huge astrology nerd,
I
as
know.
our listeners
I
know.
know.
Yeah. I recently tried to sign up for an astrology program because
Yes.
it's one of my bucket list
Tried
goals.
to. I
Yeah.
thought you did.
Oh, there's a story.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it's this program, and I've been asking my guides, I want to be a certified astrologer. I need you guys to send me a good one. So there's this
Yeah.
astrologer I like. She's coming out with a certified astrology class,
Yeah.
but you have to apply for it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got 2 tracks, the basic and the pro, like if you wanna go into
Right.
business, right? So I'm like, "Pro," but her pro track is only for advanced students. And I'm
Ah,
like, I would consider myself intermediate, you
right.
know?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I'm like, I'm gonna apply for it. So I
Mm-hmm.
pull up this
Go
application and
for it.
go for it, right? I could do the first 4 questions, bam, bam, awesome. Question number 5, it's this astrological chart that says,
Oh.
look at this chart and tell me why this person would make a good biology teacher.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I can, yeah, I think with what I know, I could do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I did question number 5. Question number 6 was like, write a paragraph about this person's overall personality, their career outlook, a second paragraph on their career outlook, a third paragraph on their romantic outlook. And I'm like, I probably could do that with some time and some little study, looking some things up here.
Mm-hmm.
But question number 7 was another chart, and it was, what are the 3 most important transits of this? And I'm like, and you lost me. Like, because transits
Wow.
are a little bit above my head right now.
Interesting.
So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna look for her basic course and just not ready to be pro. Yeah. But so I was like, wah, wah.
Well, it's just not the right thing for you
That's right.
then, but
Yeah.
you can, I mean, there are other ways to go along that path, and maybe at some point it would be, right?
Right. So I'm going to check out her regular one and see what that has to do. And I think that launches in mid-September. And so we'll check it out. I do like this astrologer because she does soul-based astrology.
Who
So
is it?
it's Astro Butterfly,
Okay.
which I've
Mhm.
talked about on the show before.
Yeah,
Right?
I actually signed up for their newsletter because of your recommendation. So I've been
Yeah.
getting that. It is really good. They've got a good site
Right.
and good information.
Yeah, so it's very different in that it's talking about all the emotional stuff that's with these planets and how that's going to affect you from a soul-based emotional
Nice.
level. And she doesn't really do horoscopes at all, right? Because her focus
Okay.
is that soul-based psychological type astrology, which I love.
The natal
That's
stuff.
my
Yeah. The stuff that's
jam,
based
right?
on your natal chart. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
so
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. Cool. So since we're already talking about astrology, I guess
let's
we
dive
could
in.
just start talking
Let's do
about
it.
today's subject, which is all about retrogrades. And we're talking about the different planets and what the retrogrades mean, what they mean specifically for the planets and everything. Before we start and go into everything, a good article to reference is on astrology.com. We also do recommend running your natal chart on AstroSeek, which is astro-seek.com. And we will be talking about what it means when you have retrograde planets in your natal chart. So, to find out which ones you have in retrograde, you want to go ahead and run your natal chart. If you haven't already, you should be able to find out that information.
So, to run a natal chart, you need 3 pieces of information: time of birth, place of birth, and day of birth. So, if you don't know your time of birth, which is the thing that usually trips people up, you can check a few places like your birth certificate. My mom found mine on a hospital bracelet. So, check
Yeah,
your
I found mine in my baby book that I didn't
baby
even
book.
know was in there. Mhm.
Right. So you may have to write and get an official copy of your birth certificate from the hospital. That might have your time of birth. So there's a couple of places that you can check if you're not sure.
Yeah, and it should also be said that if you don't have your time of birth, you can still check that it's an unknown time. It just won't be able to determine some of the information. If you're on a cusp day, it won't necessarily know if Mercury was retrograde, for example, because that become, as retrograde quite often. But for the most part, you probably will, because a lot of these planets are very slow movers and they're in retrogrades for longer periods of time. So it should be something that probably can be found out, at least that specifically. So let's back up a little bit and talk about, what does retrograde mean? What retrograde means is when Earth is passing or being passed by another planet, that planet may appear to be moving backwards. So, for example, let's say you're driving on the freeway and you pass another car. Now, it might appear that that car is moving backwards. Really, it's not. It's just you're moving faster than that car. And maybe later on, that car comes up and passes you. And then it seems like you're moving backwards. So, that's basically what it means. Also, something to note, you might have heard the term a planet going direct, and that means that it's back to its normal motion. It's no longer in retrograde. One of the reasons we picked this time to be dropping this podcast is because at the time that it does become live, which is September 23rd of 2021, there will be 7 planets in retrograde, with the addition of Mercury in a few days on, I believe, the 27th. So, April, as far as having planets in retrograde in your birth chart, in your natal chart, that's something that it's just hard to kind of figure out what that means. Can you give details on that at all?
Sure. So if you're looking at your natal chart, you may see an R or an RX next to some of the information, and that's an indicator that that planet is retrograde. But most people have at least one planet that's retrograde in their natal chart, because several of the slow moving outer planets, which are Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, and Chiron, can be in retrograde for almost half the year. So, yeah, the inner planets of Venus and Mars retrograde every other year, and the sun and moon never go retrograde, while Mercury retrogrades a lot, like 3 to 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And some astrologers believe that whenever retrograde planets are in your chart, there's a karmic lesson to be learned. So, when a planet or body like Chiron's not really a planet, it's an asteroid, is retrograde in your birth chart, its energies are turned inward. So the retrograde planet's energy isn't as easily expressed externally. And that planet's energies are felt more strongly, but there's something about them that you might keep hidden or undercover. And what that means is there can be a shyness, a discomfort, or an awkwardness expressing that planet's energy directly or overtly.
Yeah, and in doing some research, I came across something that someone had mentioned, one of the experts had mentioned that when that happens, when there is a retrograde planet, it's a need to deviate from the norm.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, April?
I would say yes, because the planet's expression is changed. So the way you express that planet's energy is going to be changed. And
Mhm.
I think, for example, I have Uranus retrograde in my chart. And we're going to talk about it in a little bit. So that's probably going to make me extra wonky rebel-y, that I'm
Mhm.
unable to, you know, show to the world a lot of these things. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, unless you do some internal work and learn the lessons you are incarnated here to learn, you might experience some challenges in the life themes of any planets that are retrograde in your chart.
And then something else too, you may have heard the term shadow periods. I was on the site astrostyle.com, and that is run by the Astro Twins, who are considered to be experts on the subject. And they say that the shadow period, which they call retrograde, is a time to prepare for upcoming retrograde. So, for example, doing things like backing up your files, or if it's post retrograde, reflecting upon the lessons learned.
Mhm. So, the shadow period is an astrological term, and it describes the period of time that it takes a retrograde planet to complete the entire cycle of movement from the furthest point of its retrograde back to the point it left before it went retrograde. So, using Mercury as an example, it generally takes 2 weeks prior to the actual retrograde, and 2 weeks after it goes direct are considered their shadow periods.
Okay, so let's start talking about the planets and what it means when they go into retrograde. The first thing I wanted to cover, however, is you may have heard of nodes. And there's something called the North Node, and this is technically it's the north node of the moon. It's a mathematical point in astrology. So it's not really a planet, but it's worth noting that the north node is always in retrograde. So it's going to show that way in your natal chart, especially if you use AstroSeek, which is the tool that I like to use. This is your cosmic destiny and your true calling. It's life lessons and what you're striving for in this lifetime. Because we are all affected differently by the North Node and because retrograde is its normal position, this isn't something that we're really going to cover in this episode. In our next episode, we'll be talking about fun things to do with your natal chart. So you'll be covering that then. So.
I will. I've got a lot of great things to say about your North and your South node, so stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go in order here. The planet closest to the sun, which is Mercury. This is the retrograde that everybody seems to hate.
Yeah.
So as I alluded to, if you are listening to this episode when it first comes out, the next retrograde for Mercury is going to be September 27th through October 23rd. So we're already in that shadow period when this actually does drop. It happens about 3 times a year because its revolution is so quick. So, its proximity to the sun is taken into account there. And Mercury is responsible for things like communication and technology, travel, moving parts, contracts and negotiations, and thinking patterns. So what's going on is you might see things like communication breakdowns, misunderstandings. For that reason, you want to make sure you read contracts carefully and mind the fine print. Some people say don't sign a contract, but I have signed contracts during Mercury retrograde. All it is just pay attention to the details and know what it is you're signing up for.
And some people actually use Mercury retrograde as a negotiating strategy. So Yoko Ono always likes to sign contracts during Mercury retrograde because it can make them easier to renegotiate later. So
interesting.
Yeah, so she uses it purposefully as a strategy in her favor.
The other thing, too, is because communication breakdowns can happen a lot during Mercury retrograde, just be mindful about communicating and know that you might have to put a little bit of extra effort in there. Also, something that I see all the time during Mercury retrograde and during the shadow period for that matter are technology mishaps. To combat that, my advice is just to be patient. Put crystals near your tech items. Satin spar or selenite, hematite, and black tourmaline are all really, really good to put there. I have some always next to my computer, next to my TV, not just during Mercury retrograde, but pretty much all the time. Also, never forget to back up your files. If you are not doing that regularly, I recommend you put a reminder on your phone to back them up, because when Mercury retrograde comes along, you're definitely at more risk of that.
Right. So since Mercury rules electronics, it's also not a good time to buy electronics. And what kind of boggles my mind is Apple tends to do their iPhone launch a lot when it's Mercury retrograde.
Maybe that's part of their planned obsolescence plan.
Right. I'm like, people don't do it. Y'all wait until Mercury is out of its shadow period, because once upon a time, towards the end of med school, within my last few weeks of med school, I'm getting ready to take some finals. My boyfriend borrowed my computer, got a wicked virus on it that shut the whole thing down. And my computer has 4 years worth of notes from med school.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm trying to study for finals. All my stuff is on there. I had to take it to the Geek Squad, right, at Best Buy. And they're like, we can't save this thing. So I had to buy a new one. And then they're trying to upload my hard drive onto this new one, and they said it kept crashing. So what happened is they tried multiple times to upload my hard drive onto this new one, and because it kept crashing, I have almost all of my med school notes in quadruplicate, right? So 4 copies of 4 years of work is on my hard drive, and I don't know it until I'm searching for a particular file and it comes up like 4 times. Can you imagine the space that's wasting on my
Oh my gosh, yes.
And because I still pull those notes up for med school, is like protocols, treatment protocols and things, I need to have that on there. but it's massively pain. It's just a huge, bleh. And I'm like, people, do not buy a computer in Mercury retrograde. Plus, that computer was the worst one I've ever had. It kept overheating and shutting down. And I'm like, never again will I buy any major item in Mercury
Wow.
retrograde. Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder if computers that are produced during Mercury retrograde
Right?
have problems. And how do
Yeah.
you know? I mean, I guess you
Right.
can. I think a lot of electronics, they do say when they came off the line, but
Mhm.
I don't think I would, as much as I am, feeling
Mhm.
Mercury retrograde, I don't think I would ever go through that kind of rigmarole just to find out,
Yeah.
unless I was dropping like $10,000 on a
Right.
piece of equipment or something. I don't know.
But just don't buy it. That's my
So Mercury retrograde, it can get, I don't want to say a bad rap because it really deserves a bad rap. But when, it's something, Mercury retrograde is about 21% of the time. And that's just the
Mhm.
retrograde part. It doesn't even count the shadow period. So it's happens often enough. We just kind of have to live with it. Just deal with it. Try to stay positive and unruffled. And if you bring in that fear energy, like, oh no, it's Mercury retrograde, then you're really manifesting the worst. So
Mhm.
definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah, and there's some beauty in the retrogrades as well, because every retrograde for any planet is about, it's the redo, revisit, rethink, retool.
Reflect.
Yeah,
It's all the
yeah. So
reevaluate.
I have gotten some fantastic business ideas and things when it's Mercury retrograde, because Mercury is that air sign. It's about thinking, it's communication. So it really helps me problem solve a lot of times when I'm feeling stuck. It's that hanged man card in tarot, right? Look at things from a new perspective. So yeah, you can get some amazing ideas Mercury retrograde. Just write them down, but don't try to launch them until after that shadow period for best results.
If you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, which is about 18% of the population, you likely have a quirky sense of humor, a more acute way of thinking. And some people with Mercury in retrograde in their chart may struggle with self doubt around their perceptions or their ability to learn. So that means there can be a lot of thinking, double checking, and reviewing of thoughts and ideas before they feel comfortable communicating them.
So I have heard this little astrological rumor that if you are born with Mercury in retrograde, you function better during Mercury retrograde than other people do. Don't know if that's true, but
I don't know.
yeah,
We'd love to hear from you. If that's the case for
yeah,
you, send us a note at spiritualbasicspodcast@gmail.com or go
yeah.
to our website, spiritualbasicspodcast.com, and let us know. It would be interesting to see what your perspective is on that.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about my ruling planet was Venus, the planet associated with love, beauty, pleasure, and finances. And it represents your capacity to express affection, enjoy a beauty and abundance, and this includes your capacity to attract and appreciate the beautiful things of the world, whether they're emotional, physical, material, mental, or spiritual things. It defines the type of people you draw to yourself based on your social values, and things ruled by Venus include what kind of sex appeal you possess, love affairs, the arts, beauty and beautiful things, adornment, affection, decoration, social graces, harmony, finances, and friendship. So when Venus is going retrograde, the good news is Venus spends the least amount of time in retrograde, only 42 days, and it only retrogrades about every 18 months. But some issues that might come up during Venus retrograde are anything related to love or money. So similar to Mercury retrograde, old lovers might return as an opportunity for closure. And astrologers say that it's best not to begin a new relationship while Venus is in retrograde, as you might be blinded to red flags. It's also best to avoid major changes in your appearance or your home's appearance during this time, as the ruler of beauty is not in her power. So keep the receipts for any new clothes or luxury purchases. Try to avoid luxury purchases related to beauty if you can. Avoid drastic haircuts or other major changes in appearance, and especially avoid cosmetic surgeries or procedures if possible. And that includes things like Botox, fillers, breast implants, because you want the ruler of beauty on your side.
And just in case you were wondering, the next time Venus goes retrograde relative to the publishing of this podcast episode would be December 19th of 2021, and it will be retrograde until January 29th of 2022.
Yeah, so it doesn't last long, which is woohoo, right? You're going to see later how others last a really long time. So when Venus is in retrograde in your natal chart, that only happens to about 7 to 8% of people are born with Venus in retrograde. And it means you have deep feelings and you don't really like superficiality. You take socializing very seriously and love is important to you, but you may have trouble expressing it. And there's a tendency to keep lovers or money hidden in some way. So, self love could also be an issue and can lead to overcompensating behaviors like overeating. And there are often deep insecurities and a tendency to sabotage relationships when Venus is in retrograde. So, now we're going to talk about Venus's celestial lover. It's Mars. Mars and Venus, in case you didn't know, it's often associated with Ares and Aphrodite and their ancient lovers, I guess, in Greek mythology.
It's like the women, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That
That's
was like
right.
the big book in, I think, the 80s. My mom read it and made my dad read it,
Right?
And it didn't help their relationship, oddly enough.
Well, Mars is one of those planets that has a rare retrograde, but it is going retrograde in early 2022. And Mars is the planet associated with conflict, aggression, war, ambition, sex drive, and physical energy. It's considered the celestial level of Venus, but it's also her opposite in every way. It represents your ability to take action or turn any ideas into action. So when Mars is going retrograde, it only retrogrades about every 26 months and lasts about 2 to 2.5 months, which is a good thing. When Mars is in retrograde, we may feel frustrated by the lack of forward movement and feel like all of our projects are stalled. We just don't feel as motivated, and any projects that we begin during this time will have a tendency to fizzle or move so slowly that it feels like we're getting absolutely nowhere. And tempers can flare, and you might take offense where none was meant or actually given. And if you're the type of person who pushes down your anger or doesn't like to express it, Mars retrograde might be pushing your buttons and you erupt in anger. So, all retrogrades provide you with the opportunity to redo and revise and make better. So, when we're talking about anger, you'll have a great opportunity in Mars retrograde to just be aware that you're going to be frustrated and you could be easier to anger, and so are all the other people you interact with. But it's great.
Fun times.
Fun times, right? And I'm like, whoo, I'm so thankful Mars is ready to retrograde. But if you know that you have anger issues and that's something you want to work on and need to work on, this is a beautiful time to seek professional help. And it's a great time to do any forgiveness work with yourself and others to release those old hurts that you're holding on to. Now, when it comes to your work, slow progress doesn't mean no progress, okay? Just keep swimming. Things are moving forward, even if it doesn't feel like it. Use the retrograde time to examine the project from every angle and see how it might be improved. And this is a good time to do foundational stuff like, do you need to search for a new accountant? Do you need to change your LLC? Is there research that you need to do or any kind of maintenance activities? Do your books. What can you do to make your business better? If possible, try not to launch new projects or begin relationships because, as we talked about before, they might go so slow or fizzle. Now, retrograde Mars in your natal chart only happens for about 9% of the population because it's so rare. So, when that happens for you, it might mean that you're shy, you avoid taking risks or challenges, you may have trouble standing up for yourself, or trouble with initiation or ambition when it comes to projects. There's a tendency toward low ambition and low sexual desire. But you may have anger issues that become explosive. You could have a tendency toward depression, which I usually define depression as anger turned inward, is what I see in my practice a lot, which makes sense. And you could also be a passive aggressive type personality as well.
Okay, so let's talk about Jupiter now. Jupiter is currently in retrograde at the time of broadcast, and it will be until October 17th of 2021. It happens about every 9 months for about 4 months at a time. So it's kind of often and a little bit longer than some of the other periods. This is the planet associated with knowledge, abundance, happiness, optimism, expansion, growth, and also laws and ethics. Jupiter is about development and opportunities leading to wealth and faith. And it represents the higher mind, exploring the unknown and having enough faith to do that. When Jupiter is in retrograde, it's a time of intense personal growth pertaining to spirituality, time to connect with your inner wisdom and expand your consciousness. So it's a really good time to be listening to podcasts about metaphysics. So awesome. It's also a time for philosophical questions. A lot of those may be raised, causing us to tap into our own beliefs and spend some time doing introspection. Again, that turning inward. The result of this may be seeing things in a new, more positive light, a realization that things are much better than you had previously believed, and also a time for introspection leading to a greater faith in yourself and the world around you, plus seeing things in a broader perspective. So it's about greater consciousness. When Jupiter is in retrograde in your natal chart, as it is in mine, you typically will have wisdom beyond your years. You may tend to have different or unusual perspectives and belief systems. Also, a sense of righteousness, faith, and morality, and don't typically believe in luck. People with Jupiter in retrograde in their birth chart value kindness, generosity, compassion, reason, a soul purpose, and have a great awareness of their gifts, though in their early years, they may have a hard time sharing those gifts. Often, also, you'll take a philosophical approach to the house Jupiter is in. For me, this is the 12th house, which is considered the unseen realm and governs all things that exist without physical forms, like dreams, secrets, and emotions. And if you know about the last couple of podcasts we've put out about all those things, that is definitely me. All of this stuff definitely resonates with me.
And at the time of this recording, we actually have all 5 outer planets in retrograde. So it's no wonder that so many of my clients, and Jen, possibly yours as well, they're going, who am I? What am I
Yeah.
supposed to be doing? What's my life purpose? What is this time on Earth all about? Y'all, it's those outer planets.
Yep.
I'm telling you, we're in
For
that space.
shizzle. Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to move on from Jupiter, the planet of luck and awesomeness, and we're going to go to Saturn, the planet of hard work. So Saturn entered retrograde at the time of this recording for May 23rd, 21, and it's going to be there until October 10th of 2021. Saturn is the planet associated with limitation, boundaries, restrictions, hard work, discipline, practicality, reality, seriousness, and structure.
And Saturn also is associated with karma. And perhaps that's why Saturn gets a bad reputation because nobody wants to deal with karma and all that stuff.
Right. So I kind of think of Saturn is like the military boot camp instructor that is yelling at you to get your shiz together and you better do it right or there's going to be consequences. A lighter version of like RuPaul going, you better work. You better work it. All right. So what's going on with Saturn? So since Saturn governs ambition, career, authority, hierarchy, and conforming to social structures, it concerns a person's sense of duty, discipline, and responsibility, and their physical and emotional endurance during hardships. Since Saturn retrogrades for almost 5 months a year, unlike other planets whose traits are kind of watered down or decreased, Saturn's traits of boundaries and limitations increases. So you may be
fun times,
right?
Fun times.
It gets a little more challenging. So you might be extra aware of things like limitations and boundaries, which can be a really great thing because you might start to feel stifled where you've like, yeah, I'll just put up with it before. But when Saturn goes retrograde, you're like, I can't do this anymore. So, I mean, Saturn does get a bad rap, but it does have its purpose.
It
So
earns it.
it earns it, and it wants you to earn it, right? So Saturn, you might be presented with an opportunity to master the lessons you haven't learned yet when it's retrograde. So you will probably be forced to confront them under Saturn's influences, and you cannot run away. And I often refer to Saturn retrograde as the karmic bitch slap. So Saturn is called the Lord of Karma, and karmic debts are paid during this time. So y'all got to pay the piper, right? You reap what you sow, and Saturn's going to make sure. If you've worked hard and mastered your lessons, though, Saturn brings you great rewards. So it's not all pain and punishment. If you have learned your lessons and you have done your work building these solid foundations, then you get great stuff. I mean, it really does come through for you where you're like, yes, I finally am getting ahead. So you got to do the work, but you will reap the rewards.
So a lot of hard work, but big payoff at the end.
Yes. Yes. And when Saturn is retrograde in your natal chart, because it's a slow moving outer planet, it spends 1/3 of the year in retrograde. So it's really common to have it in your chart. A natal Saturn retrograde can indicate an absent or uninvolved father figure that didn't allow you to fully develop proper self esteem or confidence. And the result can be a person who's people pleasing or has poor boundaries in work or relationships. This can lead to fears about never being good enough or just repressed fear in general. So, with some good internal work, you can develop boundaries, positive self esteem, and silence that inner critic.
So April, let's talk about Uranus for a minute. Getting personal.
Sure, let's.
There are many different ways to pronounce this. I never heard it pronounced Uranus until I met you. I would call it Uranus or Uranus.
I've heard of Uranus, which sounds equally as awful as Uranus to me. And then I've heard Uranus, which is the least offensive sounding to my ears. So that's the one I've decided to go with.
Anyway, no matter what you call it, this entered retrograde in August of 2021, and it will be there until January of 2022. Uranus is about unpredictable and sudden change, and Aquarius loves change. It's Aquarius's ruling planet, so that probably has something to do with that right there. Mm-hmm. It's also about inspiration, intuition, individualism, another big Aquarius trait, independence, freedom, social reform and revolution, rebels, inventions, and also joining of the personal to the collective consciousness. All really big Aquarius sounding energy right there. Uranus in its current state, it's entered Taurus in 2018, and it's going to remain in Taurus till 2026.
So if you are a Taurus like me, basically what that means is your entire life will deeply change. So I'm like, yay, awesome. I'm super looking forward to that.
Well, because Taurus is an earth sign, it's very wants that stability and all that kind of stuff. So when you start throwing changes at it, it's chaos, right? Mm-hmm. For Aquarius, it's like bring it on. So that makes a lot of sense.
The last time Uranus was in Taurus was in the Great Depression and the stock market crash. And whenever Uranus does anything like changes signs or goes retrograde or goes direct, you have big changes on the world scene. It really affects everyone when it does things. So, woohoo.
Yeah, I would say it's an air sign's dream, but an earth sign's worst nightmare.
Yes.
Pertaining to this specific retrograde, it would be good to take some of that Taurus, which is ruling planet Venus, right, energy, to have faith in love and the universe to counteract that rational, logical part of you that Uranus is bringing forth. Other things that are going on during this retrograde, during any Uranus retrograde, actually, lots of big changes and surprising developments, tons of breakthroughs, though, coming at you from all different directions. So it's not all bad. Even if you aren't a fan of change, you certainly would be a fan of breakthroughs. It might be a time that challenges your beliefs or at least broadening them. A lot of excitement, adventure, and self-discovery. Of course, it's a good time to reflect on all the rapid shifts that are unfolding. If you have Uranus retrograde in your natal chart, with which both April and I do,
Mhm.
it can mean a fear of change or mistrust of new technologies or processes. You also may tend to hide your eccentricities rather than flaunt them. Also, you may have a tendency to let energy accumulate and get pent up. So for example, anger or emotions, and then lead to a huge release bomb before just going back to normal as if nothing ever happened. So for me, that third point is definitely true. I don't know so much about the other ones though. Like I will keep stuff, and it's not like I purposely hold stuff in. It's just it doesn't bother me, doesn't bother me, doesn't bother me. And all of a sudden, it friggin' bothers me so much I can't deal with it. And then as soon as I release all that energy, it's like, okay, I'm good now. It's almost like the pressure cooker, like
Yeah.
the Instant Pot. He is sudden release. And then when it's done, you're like, okay, we're good now.
Yeah. I can definitely resonate with hiding some of my eccentricities, for sure. And I have an Aries moon, so I've always thought that slow build, quick flash fire was due to that Aries moon. But yeah, I could see now knowing this that Uranus retrograde in my natal chart might have something to do with that as well.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Neptune now. We're done talking about Uranus, April. We'll talk about Neptune now.
All right, the watery planet.
All right, that's the last time I'm using that sophomoric joke.
That's like a 12-year-old joke.
I know. It's funny. This is like probably our 8th or 9th podcast about, astrology.
Mhm.
And we've never said that before, but I'm feeling very dad jokey today or kid jokey. So talking about Neptune now, it went to retrograde on June 25th of 2021, and it's going to be there until December 1st of 2021. It's currently in Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune. So it's in its home planet or its home sign. It will move into Aquarius, however, on October 20th. So even though it's got that Pisces energy now, there will be a little bit of an energy shift in mid-October. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But Neptune is an outer planet. It's slower moving, and it spends about 14 years in each sign. It is the planet associated with philosophy, spirituality, imagination, fantasy, magic, illusion, mystery, and psychic abilities, and the subconscious. Because Neptune is in its home sign of Pisces, it's being extra. It's being extra Pisces. Virgo is opposite Pisces on the zodiac wheel, so Virgos may especially feel challenged by this energy coming up. There also may be some confusion. We might find ourselves overly optimistic about things that turn out to be not quite as we had perceived them to be. But as it shifts into Aquarius in mid-October, we may then find that there's disappointment because some unexpected truths will come to light. Just my advice is don't lose your optimism and try to focus on facts.
So there is a tendency when Neptune is retrograde as well to fall back into destructive patterns, especially if you have addictive patterns to sex, drugs, alcohol, food. So that's something you also need to watch when Neptune is retrograde.
It's the devil card.
Yes.
In Tarot.
It is, yeah.
Another thing that happens in Neptune retrograde is there might be some more political division, which we definitely don't need more of in this world, but it's definitely something that could happen. However, many people will also be drawn to a humanitarian cause, and that Aquarius energy is bringing that in. So what I would say is think about what cause are you passionate about? It's definitely time to act on it. And for me, I'm already feeling this energy, April.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit, very little bit about what I've been doing. I've had a recent energy shift where I'm trying to be a lot more sustainable in many, many, many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I have made a lot of major changes and a lot of minor changes recently about how I live my life and the things that I do. So another thing about Neptune being in retrograde is that dreams are likely to be more active or vivid. So it's a good time to do dream work or astral projection. You can reference episodes 37 and 41 respectively on those topics. And of course, heightened psychic abilities and consciousness, awareness, a great time to connect with your spirit team and work on further developing your gifts. Your imagination is also thriving at this time. So great time to work on any creative pursuits and projects. And also because of all this crazy heightened energy, it's really, really, really important to stay properly grounded. When you have Neptune in retrograde in your natal chart, as April does,
Neat.
you may have a discomfort expressing vulnerable parts of you, like your spiritual beliefs or compassion. And it's not that you don't have them, you just prefer to keep them private. You may also have a sense of mistrust and tendency to expect the worst rather than be optimistic or give someone the benefit of the doubt. And also, you may hold back on dreaming too big because you have a fear of big disappointment. And it's funny
Mhm.
because when I wrote those, when I researched all of this, I was like, wow, that sounds like my ex to a T. Now, my ex,
Mhm.
I don't know what time he was born. I've never run his chart before. I just know what his sun sign is. And I thought, I'm going to go ahead and run his chart because see if I can find out if Neptune was in
Mhm.
retrograde when he was born, because it really,
Mhm.
really is him to a T. And sure enough, it is.
Yeah.
He was Neptune retrograde.
So I can resonate with a lot of this, and I have Neptune retrograde in the 4th house, and that's a really kind of some astrologers call it a rather unfortunate placement because
And there you are, having these sense of mistrust and tendency to expect the worst
yes,
rather than
right?
be optimistic.
So the 4th house is the house of home and family, right? And because Neptune is also that planet of addictions, when you look at that placement, it quite often indicates you had one parent that was addicted to drugs or alcohol, and sure enough, I did. I do
Interesting.
have an alcoholic dad, who I wonder if he had this in his chart as well, because he was the type of person who was reclusive, paranoid, things like that. But yeah, so I struggle with a lot of these themes in my life, absolutely. So let's just keep the the party rolling here with Pluto. So Pluto is the planet, and you know what? I will always think of Pluto as a planet. I know Pluto got downgraded to some astronomers don't think he is, but I love my Pluto.
Yeah, I think there was like a 9-month period when they were like Pluto was not a planet. And the funny thing is my grandson has a book
Mhm.
that's about the 8 planets. And I
I
was like,
know.
oh my gosh, hold on to that because when you're in your 20s, that thing will probably be worth a lot of money.
Right? I'm like, Pluto, home dog, you will always be a planet to me, brother. Love you, Pluto. All right. Well, Pluto is associated with sex, the actual act of sex, not the desire. The desire falls under Mars. Transformation, power, obsessive desire, and things necessary for wealth, like investments, banking, loans, debts, and mortgages. It's also about the breakdown of psychological blocks that prevent growth. And if you're following along with Greek mythology, Pluto is Hades. So it's the underworld. It's pretty deep stuff, right? So Pluto is the slowest moving planet, and an entire generation may have it in the same sign. This gives it a historical importance as it shapes a generation of people. Pluto retrogrades for about 5 to 6 months a year, and about 45% of people have Pluto in retrograde.
Well, that makes sense because it's in retrograde about 45% of the year. So,
Right. So Pluto is going to transform things that need regeneration, whether you want it to or not. So look at whatever house in your natal chart that Pluto is in, and you can see what area that this transformation is going to be expressed in your life. So Pluto's associated with recklessness, mental obsession and compulsion, emotional resistance, and overall transcendence. It's also associated with unsolved mysteries, secrets, and taboos. So it's a great time when Pluto is in retrograde to do shadow work or deep subconscious, unconscious work, as you might get answers to questions that have eluded you previously. If you have addictions, the urges may get stronger during Pluto retrograde, but that can give you the opportunity to seek help. It's also a great time for psychic development or tapping into your subconscious for healing. Now, if you have Pluto retrograde in your natal chart like Jen and I do, here's some extra fuzzy information for you. So you may be more comfortable working in the shadow realm. So that means you're way more comfortable doing your shadow work, accepting death, you're interested in the occult, the subconscious, the mysteries, or healing others through subconscious work.
Which is exactly what I
Yeah.
do with hypnosis, which
Yeah.
is crazy. When I read that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's
Yeah.
kismet.
Yeah. It's our boy Pluto. So you may have suppressed fears about being controlled by others or difficulty expressing your personal power. There could be trust issues and possibly paranoia at its worst. And there's also an increased desire for secrecy and privacy.
So for me, this all resonates pretty well. However, I would say it resonates with my younger self. I have done a lot of
Mhm.
healing and overcome a lot of these, especially I'm an open book. I'm not about privacy and secrecy for the most part, unless security is involved,
Mhm.
personal security. So I think that, however, I've always chalked that up to my Leo ascendant.
Yeah. So I also have a Leo ascendant and I am a bit more secretive and private. And maybe that's due to that Neptune Pluto double whammy, right? It's like bam, bam.
Yeah.
But I was
Hmm.
also raised in that environment with my dad, who was reclusive and secretive. So I wonder how much of that is nature versus nurture, how much of that
Sure.
is in the birth chart. So, yeah. All right. And finally, we come to Chiron. So, Chiron is a comet with an unusual and erratic orbit. So, because of its erratic orbit, it doesn't spend the same amount of time in each sign. So, I have Chiron in Aries, which it spends 7 years in Aries. It spends 8 years in Pisces, but all of the others, it could spend as little as a year up to that 8 years. So,
Hmm.
it's very different. Chiron sits between Saturn and Uranus and was discovered in 1977. In Greek mythology, Chiron was a centaur who's the son of Zeus and a nymph. But when he was born, both parents rejected him. And so immediately you have the deep wound of rejection. And the sun god Apollo adopted him and taught him to be a very skilled healer and teacher. However, Chiron received an injury that he wasn't able to heal himself, and he became known as the wounded healer. So, in astrology, Chiron represents our deepest wound and our efforts to heal it. You want to look at the sign and house for Chiron, and that is how and where your deep wounds and opportunities for healing are going to show up in your life. So, Chiron gives you the opportunity and really tells you it's your mission in this life to heal that wound and share your wisdom with others about how you healed it as the teacher aspect of Chiron. So, when Chiron is in retrograde, it gives you the opportunity to re examine your pain, and you may find yourself turning inward for answers instead of searching for them externally. So, doing shadow work, beginning new self help or professional therapies can help you release that pain. So, getting that kind of help is very favored under Chiron. And again, look at that house and sign for clues on where you're expressing this wound and what you need to do to heal that. Now, if you have Chiron retrograde in your natal chart, it's going to show you where you tend to hold on to pain longer than it's necessary or it's good for you. And when Chiron is retrograde natally, it's important to accept that you aren't perfect, others aren't perfect, and learn to accept those imperfections and vulnerability. And that's going to help you heal and accept yourself.
Sounds like Virgo energy there.
Yeah, so because I have Chiron in Aries, it's about, and Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, it's about wounds of the self. And Chiron is in Aries is very much like, no, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, your arm could be falling off, and it's like, no, no, I don't need
Yeah.
help. I'm totally fine. I'm good.
When you trip and fall on
Yeah.
your face and your nose is bleeding, but you get up like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah. What do you guys need, right? You need anything? While I'm up, you need anything?
So I have Chiron in Pisces in the eighth house. And what the eighth house is about is things like intimacy, shared finances, inheritance, taxes, loans, assets, properties, those kind of things, joint ventures. So a lot of money stuff. And definitely I've had some money wounds that I've had to heal over the years.
Mhm.
But again, this is kind of like what I said about the last thing is I have worked on those lessons.
Mhm.
So it just goes to show, I think, that even if you're like, oh no, I have lessons to learn about this. Well, do the work and you'll overcome that. It's not like doom and gloom, like you're destined to have this your whole life, even though, knock wood. Hopefully I'm done with those lessons because I don't want them anymore.
Well, in 5 more years, you'll find out when Chiron goes into Pisces, right?
I guess so. So anyway, but yeah, great episode, April. So much fun talking about astrology. And like I said, next time we've got another astrology-packed episode coming up about some different kinds of things that you can do or learn from your natal chart, not just about your sun, moon, rising, and houses and all that kind of stuff, but some really cool stuff. So we look forward to seeing you again. We hope all this information was helpful to you. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
This has been Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen. Find full episodes on your favorite listening platform or visit spiritualbasicspodcast.com.